Okay, so the last phase of the game is the Mythos phase. And this is involving the tokens that we set aside at the start of the game, right? And remember, this is a scenario specific thing. So if you look at the scenario card, the Mythos cup is built with all these components, right? And you see them right here, right? So one by one in player order, each player will take 2 of these tokens and then resolve them, okay? So I'm just gonna refer to the instructions for this, right? So this one is about spreading doom. So you would take discard the bottom card of the event deck and place 1 doom token in the location with the symbol, right? So for example, we take the bottom one here and then put a doom on the black cave, okay? So we'll put that back. So that's what that one's all about. Then there's spawning a monster. So in the monster deck, I didn't mention before, but so you draw the bottom monster from the monster deck, and then when monsters are defeated, you put the monsters on the top of the deck. That's how that works. So that's spawning a monster, and then there's just a note that if the text says something about prey, then the person who drew the monster is the prey. Reading headlines, so that is the 13 cards that we set up in the beginning. You would draw one of those, and a lot of times those are cards that you end up keeping. Depends on the card, but yeah, and there's only 13 of them, and then they don't get replenished. So there's a note here that if you are instructed to pick a headline card and there's none there, then you put a doom on the scenario sheet, which means that we are marching closer and closer to impending doom. So that's not good. All right, the next thing is spawning clues, so that's good. So you draw the top card of the event deck and place a clue token in that neighborhood, right? And then you take the top 2 cards of that deck and then shuffle those 3 and put them on top of the, right? So for example, right, I would pick, I pick the top card, right, of the deck, so I just did that. And so I would put a clue in Rivertown, and then Rivertown, and then shuffle this into the top, amongst the top 2 cards, so that one of the top 3 is this event card, okay? Okay, then gate burst. So it says resolve a gate burst, so you draw the top card again of the event deck, and then it's a little bit misleading because there are these gate tokens that look just like that, and it's not about putting a gate out, but you pick the top card of the event deck and place a doom token in each one of the spaces in the neighborhood. And then you shuffle that card and the entire event discard pile together and place them on the bottom of the discard, right? So you would take that card and then all the rest of these here and then put them at the bottom, all right? And I guess that would mean that there's no unstable space for a brief period. So, okay, then this symbol is a reckoning. So there's different cards that'll have this reckoning symbol, and then when that gets drawn, the reckoning effect will happen, right? And then there's also just a note that, yeah, sometimes the reckonings will be on headlines. I know they'll be on other cards as well. And then there's just a note about a lot of times, yeah. So there's a reckoning effect on the scenario, all right? So look at the scenario first and then look at all the cards that everybody has. And then if you draw a blank one, nothing happens and just go about your day. Yep, and then that's it. So when you run out of, so you take those, when you draw your 2, you set the tokens aside. and then the Mythos Cup will run out every couple turns, depending on how many players you have. And then once it runs out, that's when you refresh with everything. So it basically forces you to pick each one of these things over the course of a couple turns. All right. Okay, so there's just a couple final things to note about the game that's at the end of the instruction book. So right now, yeah, so we're looking at the display here, all the 5 cards that are out, and then you have your item cards, your ally cards, spell cards, and then these are special cards that are specially instructed to look for things usually. So one thing that you'll notice, right, so up in the corner is the value, how much they cost if you are able to buy them. Another thing too is if there are these symbols like the hands mean that, so like a shotgun, you can only use the shotgun at once because it requires 2 hands, right? But the ones with single hands, you can use 2 of them at the same time, right? So now there's no limit to the number of items you can carry, but the hands just represent, okay, like you can combine 2 single-handed items, but you can't, if you have a double-handed item, then that's the only thing you can use. And then these other things without those symbols, you're just able to use without any issue, all right? Another thing that could happen, you'll notice that like this says common curio, curio tome, common weapon, right? Sometimes you're instructed that you like discover a common item or like a curio, and when you do that, you basically search through and try to find the first one that comes up of that type. So if I was looking for if I found a common item, I would search through the deck. So like, all right, that's not common. That one's not common. Okay, this one's common. So I'd get to keep this one, and then I'd have to shuffle these back into the deck so that I don't know what's coming up soon. All right, so that's how that works. The other thing, right, sort of as a reminder with spells, so most spells have a symbol at the bottom, and that's the cost of using the spell. So because like spells are magical and ordinary humans can't understand and comprehend what it's doing, you suffer a horror for casting a spell. So you basically take damage, right, for using these spell cards. They stay with you, so you can use them again and again, but it costs that horror every time you use them, unless you have remnant tokens. So the remnant tokens look like that, and you can spend a remnant token along with using your spell to prevent taking that horror damage, right? So and they spend 1 for 1. If there was a spell that had 2 of these symbols, then you'd have to spend 2 of the remnants in order to take no horror, okay? And just as a reminder too, remnants are gained when you're performing the ward action. So the ward action is one of the things you can do. You test your lore to remove doom from a space, and if you remove 2 or more, then you gain 1 remnant. But it's harder to find a space with more than 1 doom. But it happens, but it's just harder to find that. So there's that way to gain a remnant, or if there is a monster that has the remnant, well, if a monster, actually, there it is, yeah, it's on the back. If a monster has a remnant symbol, that means that you gain a remnant for defeating that monster. Okay, and then lastly, talking about allies, right? So if you get an ally and they become in play, right, with you, so you can use them as an action, right, as part of one of your actions, right? So we talked kind of before about some components have actions on them. That's just like this, right? So you can use Zora Larson, use her action. Now, Zora can also take damage for you, so she has 2 damage that she can take or 2 horror that she can take. And so if you were to receive damage, you could apply that to your ally instead of to you, right? Yeah, and then when the ally reaches their max, then they are basically dead. Yeah, one other note about that, so allies can take damage for you, but sometimes there'll be cards that say that you take direct damage or direct horror, and in that case, you can't apply the damage or horror to the ally. You have to take it yourself. All right, so the last topic I'm going to talk about is on the back of the instruction guide, and it talks about anomalies. So anomalies are these like burst-looking tokens that come with the game, and you don't use anomalies for every scenario, but in the approach to Azathoth, you do, and so I'll just talk about it in case it comes up, right? So basically, if you put, when 3 Doom tokens show up on any space, then, so for example, if this was here and this was here, then once that 3rd Doom token is placed inside a space, then an anomaly token shows up, okay? And then anytime that additional Doom were to be placed in the zone, in the neighborhood with an anomaly, like, oh, let's say you had to put a Doom token here at the police station, instead of putting it there, it would go on the scenario card and just bring you closer and closer to losing the game, right? So that's how that works. For removing anomalies, basically you have to just go through and use the ward action to clear all the Doom from the entire neighborhood, and then once all the Doom has gone away, the anomaly goes away, all right? The other thing too, right, because you'll be spending, if you're trying to clear all the Doom from a neighborhood that has an anomaly, you're going to be spending a lot of time there and ending up doing encounters there. So if you're in a space with, or if you're in a neighborhood with an anomaly, you don't take a normal encounter card, right? So you would not take the East Town card to do a normal encounter, which you would expect perhaps being at the police station to get items. Instead, you have to take from this anomaly deck, which they instructed in the beginning. So this is where the temporal fissure cards are being used, right? Going way back. Yeah, create the anomaly deck using the temporal fissure cards. So that's how that comes into play. So then you look at the amount of Doom in the entire neighborhood, and no, it's the amount of Doom in your space, excuse me. So you take the card, and then based on the amount of Doom in that space, you resolve that action, right? So in this case, if I was at the police station, I would resolve the 0. So that's everything from the basic learn to play instruction guide on how to play this game. There's a rules reference guide that also comes with it that is basically laid out like a glossary. So if you run into issues where you're not sure what to do in a certain scenario, a certain situation, you can look that up in the rules reference. But anyway, hopefully this is helpful, and I hope you enjoy playing the game.